Hello everyone, this is the finale of What If Naruto Took Hinata for Himself, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. The floor was wet. Naruto, dimly aware of this as the world around him swirled into light and color. His feet were bare and now cold. He moved to find a dry patch, but the chains that bound his arms tightened and pulled him back against the wall. That dry chuckle filled the air. Naruto froze. Before him there were steel bars that stretched to the high ceiling. Behind them was only darkness aside from the eyes. The huge glittering eyes. Oh dear. Things appear to have gotten a little worse. Naruto snarled and yanked at the chains. That's my line, said the fox with another laugh. Then all at once, his eyes hardened and his voice was cold. Would it have been all that troublesome just to step around that thing? You know, the big blue sword, shiny, a bit on the sharp side. He growled, foolish boy. Throwing away your life, my life. And now you are just a broken creature, clinging to a rock face, trying not to floor. Broken creature. Hinata, cried Naruto, yanking on the chains. The fox laughed again. Oh, don't worry, she's here. Actually, you should be grateful. She provided the kickstart we needed to keep us alive. Shame she gave us her soul in the process. Naruto's head snapped up. What? The darkness receded from the front of the cage and Naruto saw, in the darkness, a body. No. Two boss entwined on the floor. He didn't need to hear the sounds to realize what was happening. The creature on top was moving rhythmically while the one below, her wide eyes closed, arched her back and stretched her arms pinned above her head. Stop it, he screamed. The monster laughed heartily. She's only doing what she wants. She's a part of us now. Watch. Unbidden, Naruto's gaze went to the two animals copulating on the floor. He looked at the first, it was blonde and muscled. He pinned the other's arms over her head and held her there while he concentrated on his task. It was Naruto. The Naruto chained to the wall felt sick, but then the woman below his doppelganger opened her eyes. The eyes weren't white, they were blood red. Naruto screamed in desperation. Then when he couldn't reach her, toppled back against the wall where he was chained and covered his face. The Kyuubi was laughing. The things that go on in your head, boy. I'll tell you, I was surprised. Shut up. Naruto bellowed, that's nothing to do with me, that's all you. Give her back now. No can do. The demon said, she gave herself to me for any use. He chuckled as the Hinata with red eyes let out a low M. No. Naruto whispered. No, she gave herself to me. The Kyuubi's eyes flickered to him and back to Hinata. If I return her soul, will you promise me something? Anything. Naruto gasped. What? Well, I haven't decided quite yet, have I? We'll thrash out the details later. But if you are willing, then mark this. A piece of paper slipped between the guard bars and Naruto found the chains released. Instantly he swayed and toppled to his knees. But he knew what to do and bit his thumb. Blood flowed from the wound and he streaked his hand across the paper. Yes, hissed the Kyuubi as the paper rolled up and flew away from Naruto, over the pair of entwined boss on the floor. As Naruto watched, the Naruto on the floor drew back to the red-eyed Hinata's irritation. She cried out in anger and disappointment. But then as Naruto stared, her eyes faded from red to pink to milky white again. For a second she looked confused, then sat up and saw Naruto across from her. She pulled herself onto all fours and crawled over to him, reaching between the bars of his prison. He grabbed her hand and pressed it to his face. Tears came to her eyes. I thought you were S. She cried softly. Naruto was allowed one moment of her hand against his scalding skin before the snaking tendrils shot out and wrapped her in their tight embrace. She screamed in fear, but they dragged her back easily as she fought it with all her might. Naruto screamed too and hung onto her hand, but the demon sped her easily from his arms. No, he howled as she disappeared from sight. Oh, do be quiet, hissed the fox. I'm sending her back just after you. When you get to the surface, kiss her once, just once, that'll give back her soul, the rest is up to her. Naruto nodded. Right, off you go. The room exploded in a shower of sparks and for the second time Naruto was soaring upwards. He burst into the cold night air coughing. He slammed against to the floor and lay very still. Naruto, squealed Sakura. He looked at her. Her face was streaky with tears and she was pale and shaking. Seeing her, Naruto suddenly remembered where they were. Hiashi is he. He's alive, she gasped, though I don't see how you are. Warmth to his right reminded Naruto suddenly of the monster's instruction and sat up. An arm fell from across his chest. Hinata's. Her eyes were sightless and staring. He rolled her onto her back and stared in panic. She was surely nothing could save her. He shook her shoulders, her head lolled stupidly like a puppet. Sakura grabbed him. Naruto, she's gone. Naruto threw her off and crouched over her. He remembered the bargain. Taking her in his arms, he pressed his mouth against her still warm lips and waited. Nothing happened. Naruto kissed her again. Still nothing. He felt tears of frustration spring to his eyes. Damn you, you liar. From inside his head he heard a low chuckle and a voice that made his blood run cold, impatient. Naruto felt like someone had wrapped their hand around his organs and was trying to pull them out of his mouth. He gagged and coughed, wrapping his hands around his n. Realizing that this must be something to do with his plan, Naruto lurched forward and kissed her one last time. He felt the strings connect. Something bound her to him while her soul was dragged from his body and slipped back into its rightful owner. Hinata's eyes glimmered with life and her eyelids flickered. Naruto felt hot tears spill over and land on her face. She was alive, he was alive, they were both alive. Then he felt the most extraordinary fatigue steal over him and his head drooped onto the floor. She reached over and stroked his cheek once before letting the same fatigue slide over her and steal her away to sleep. Sakura was lying beside them watching over her friends when the others arrived. Everyone was there. Ino, Chuji, Shikamaru, Lee, Kiba and Shino. And Tenten of course, who flew straight past them and into Neji's arms. All eyes were on Hinata and Naruto sleeping on the floor. Ino knelt beside Sakura. We decided. Sakura smiled and waved her off. You're here, nothing else matters. We sent a message to the village. If it got there, they should already be sending medics and transport. She looked down at the sleeping couple. They'll need attention. Sakura sighed, slipping into unconsciousness. Ino smiled. They're not the only ones. Naruto woke in a clean white room. He tried to rise but fell back, clutching his chest. His heart hurt. There were sharp stabbings in his chest when he moved. Not only those, but his arms were heavily bandaged. They felt bizarre and disconnected. Still, through the pain and drug-muddled haze, one face came to him mind. He swung his legs over the edge of his bed and sat up. As he tried to find the energy to push himself to his feet, Sakura burst in. She was wearing a dressing gown, but other than that seemed fine. Her pallor had gone. What the hell are you doing? She snapped. Hina. She shoved him back onto bed and lifted his legs, dropping them on the bed. You can't go anywhere, she said, bustling around. She turned to open the curtains and closed her eyes to let the warmth fall on her face. When she turned back to look at her friend, the bed was empty. Naruto stumbled down the corridor. His chest hurt a lot. Surely she couldn't be all that far away. As he thought this, he caught a scent on the air. Lilacs. With fresh hope he stumbled after it, relying only on his sense of smell to guide him. He reached a room. A bare empty room with the bed stiesped down. The smell was strongest here. She couldn't have been gone long. The window was open and Naruto staggered over to look out. He saw the hospital garden and the river just beyond there. A lone figure was stood on the bank. He couldn't be sure it was her. But maybe, just maybe, he was right. Hiashi was standing several hundred feet from his daughter as she stared out across the water. The hospital off to his left loomed over them. He had never liked it here. She, however, seemed fine. She was unlimited. Perhaps it was time to start letting go. The archaic practices of their family were outdated. His brother had always talked of arranged marriage with contempt. Hiashi wondered now if he had been right. He had written off his short marriage to River as a one-time disaster, putting it down to his own shortcomings. But maybe marrying for convenience really was doomed in almost all cases. He loved River, that was undeniable, but to make a 17-year-old girl leave her home for a place she had never been, for a man she had barely met, was just plain cruel. Hinata was even that age yet. Hinata. Hiashi almost jumped out of his newly healed skin. He looked to the hospital and saw a blonde blur drop from a second-story window. His daughter whipped around. She stared at the boy for a second, then the boy began to sprint towards Hinata. She tried to run, but she was still exhausted and couldn't move too quickly. Only when there were just a few feet between did she truly throw herself forwards into his arms. He whirled her around and then set her down and took her face in his hands. They stared into each other's eyes for a full minute, then Naruto pressed his forehead against hers. More shouts from the hospital. 8 attendants were sprinting towards them carrying a stretcher. Sakura was at the front looking ready to K. Naruto, she growled, if you recover I'm going to s your head off. But if he heard her he didn't show it, he was far too busy kissing his wife. So I sent you on a simple bodyguard mission and you came back married to the client. Naruto nodded sheepishly. Tsunade tented her fingers. Well, this is a fairly phenomenal failure, Naruto, even for you. Actually, Naruto said, perking up, she's still alive, therefore the mission was a success. You were both in hospital for a week. Still, he grinned, rubbing the back of his head. The door rattled once, they turned to look at it, and then burst open. Hinata fell in, pursued by 2 guards. Lady Tsunade, she gasped, please, don't be angry with him. It's not his fault, he was protecting me. I'm the one to blame. Father was going to marry me off and Naruto rescued me. She stuttered to a halt as she saw everyone looking at her. She suddenly turned bright pink and bowed so low she almost fell over. I'm sorry, she squeaked. Naruto sighed and walked over to her. He pulled her up and led her over to the desk. Lacing his fingers with Hinata's, Naruto smiled at Tsunade. We're serious about this whole thing. It was a rash decision but we don't regret it. Tsunade looked at their hands and up into his eyes and Hinata's frightened face. So you don't want a divorce? She asked slowly. Hinata's hand tightened around Naruto's. No, he said calmly. Hinata smiled at the floor. Tsunade nodded, looking at them. Go on then, get out. What? Naruto asked, surprised. You heard me, get out. Hinata almost kissed her. Instead she bowed low until Naruto dragged her out of the office. Ah, to be young and in love. Tsunade sighed, then chuckled at the thought of the stubby, blonde 12-year-old that she had met being married. All grown up, I see. She whispered after Naruto and was surprised to feel a lump in her tea. Naruto sat up in bed and looked around his room. He couldn't get used to this view. His old single bed had been chucked out and replaced by a plush double bed with a soft leather headboard, repositioned on the opposite side of the room. Hinata's choice. Naruto had to admit the cushioned wood was a lot kinder than the solid wall in relation to their night's activities. There was still a dent on the other side of the room where his head had almost gone through the plaster. Their bed now sat facing the windows, so when the sun rose it was like a natural alarm. Naruto slept through it nonetheless, waking up an hour later to the smell of fresh coffee, breakfast and usually a note on the table explaining where she had gone. Naruto was sorry he didn't get up earlier, if only he could see her being so, well, wife-ish, but it was stay up late or get up early and he found he defiantly preferred the former. Naruto kicked off the duvet and let the cool air wash over him. It was going to be a nice day, and outside the sky was already a sweet blue. Naruto grinned at it. Definitely nice. He walked into the kitchen to see the bowl on the table with a note propped against it. I've gone shopping, although I might be back before you're up. Do not attempt to use the dishwasher. The dishwasher was another new fixture in the house. Naruto had tried to use it the other day to Hinata's exasperation. There is now a funny wailing sound when it turns on. I'm pointing, no fingers. There followed a tiny drawing of a hand pointing straight at Naruto with the word, you, emblazoned beneath it. This was the end of the neatly printed note. Beneath though was scrawled a quick message. Be warned, Tenten wants to come round for dinner. If she calls, put her off. XXX. Smirking, Naruto put the note down and picked up the porridge. It was still warm, so he ate it quickly while hunting around for a clean shirt. He remembered with fondness the messiness of his house before Hinata moved in. It had been disgusting, nothing was clean, but he had a system and could usually find clothes when he needed them. Now his dirty clothes were gone as soon as they hit the floor, and if something wasn't clean he couldn't locate it. The result being that he spent most of the morning wandering around in his boxes like a lost puppy. A bored, cold, lost puppy. There was an upside. Naruto had barely been aware of the fact that he had a kitchen before Hinata arrived. She had stared at the mess open-mouthed for a full minute until Naruto had made a remark about catching flies and she had shut it pretty quick, obviously thinking he was serious. He had been exiled for 3 hours when he met up with Shikamaru and complained about the downside of married life. But when he returned he had a kitchen and mentally took back everything he had said. It had been sparkling clean, 2 bin liners sat in the corner bulging with junk, dirt and food that was well past its peak. After they had put 'em out or thrown 'em out the open window because they wouldn't fit out the door, Hinata had opened all the cupboards and told him where everything now was. He had gazed around in amazement until Hinata made the same joke about fly catching. At that point he had come round and looked at her. She had laughed, then kissed him, to which he had responded with vigor, almost forgetting about their location until she insisted that they moved or they would break the kitchen table. A slam of the door and Hinata walked in with Sakura. Both had grocery bags in their arms. Sakura looked disgusted when she saw him. "Geez, Naruto. Put some clothes on." "Couldn't find any," he said cheerfully and trotted over to Hinata. "Morning," he said, only it came out, Munich, because he was kissing her at the same time. Sakura coughed loudly as she put the things on the table and Hinata pulled away with a giggle to help her. Naruto walked up the stairs to Tsunade's office. He hoped he had a mission. It had been a while. He walked straight in, not bothering to knock. "Naruto!" cried a voice in obvious delight. The woman in the chair opposite the Hokage was, in every respect, his wife aside from those deep blue eyes. "River." She leapt out of her seat and ran over to hug him tightly. He staggered a little but hugged her back and smiled. Their last embrace had been somewhat bittersweet. "What are you doing here?" he asked, smiling. Just think, if she was here that would make Hinata almost perfectly happy. "Well, I was talking to the man who tends all the legal docents in my house. You met him, prancing idiot who sits in the lobby of the big room, and he told me something interesting." Naruto waited, thinking of the squat little man who had almost turned him away from the big room of the water country mansion. "My daughters are under the guardianship of their father until his death, at which point they become wards of the Hyuga house, or until they are married." "What? But Hinata's an adult." River shrugged. "Such is the life of a princess. Anyway," he said, "I can see her without Hiashi or the council getting in the way." Naruto frowned, knowing that as soon as he became Hokage he was going to force some changes with the nobles. But he also found he had gleaned a little respect for the Doi man in charge of legalities at the Hyuga house. "Hinata's at home. Come see her." River looked sad then. "No, I can't." "Why not?" Naruto looked upset as the thought of Hinata glowing with happiness at the sight of her mother slipped away. "I'm on a special visit on my way up north to visit some old friends and do a little business. This is just a pit stop. I'm pushing my luck as it is. Legal or not, I doubt the family council would be thrilled I'm in town. No, I'm just passing through to inform certain people of the new situation and deliver something." She dug around in the pocket of her long dark coat and came out with a tiny box. "This was mine. I always wanted Hinata to have it. Will you give it to her?" Naruto took the box but didn't open it, knowing already what it was. They nodded to each other, then River laughed and flung her arms around Naruto. "Thank you, son-in-law." He laughed and picked her up, which made her squeal. Then when he set her down she kissed his cheek, nodded once to Tsunade and walked out of the office. Tsunade stared at the box with serious intent. Naruto clutched it to his chest. "Forget it. Oh please, just let me see it." "No." He ran from the room and didn't stop before he reached home. That evening Naruto was at home alone. He was trying to cook but was failing miserably. He had already burned several dishes and now, somewhat rashly, was inventing his own food. Hinata walked in, her nose wrinkling at the smell and her eyes widening at the sight of Naruto in an apron. "What's that?" she asked politely, pointing at the dark brown goo Naruto was forcing around the bottom of the pan with a big dessert spoon. There's soup in there and I think some noodles." He lifted the spoon, long strands of the gloop clung to it. It could have been noodles, but then it could have been a lot of things. Realizing the extent of his failure, Naruto dropped the spoon back in the pan and turned off the cooker. Hinata looked relieved and went and sat at the table. Naruto inched over to her, hand clutched tight around the jewelry box. Silently he set it on the table beside her. She set down the magazine she had picked up and looked at it. He pushed it towards her and waited. Her fingers touched it and she peered up at him, tentative. Then she picked up the tiny velvet container and weighed it in her hands. Slowly she took the lid and flipped it open. The diamond was cut in the shape of an octagon surrounded by sapphires. Naruto felt his stomach lurch. That ring had to be the most expensive thing in the entire apartment. The whole district even. But this is. She looked up at him. That was what Tsunade wanted. He shrugged, feeling a little sheepish that he hadn't even thought to buy her an engagement ring. Hinata pulled the ring out of the box and slipped it on her finger. It was a perfect fit. She held it up to admire it where it glittered in the lamp light. She stood and took Naruto's face in her hands. He didn't wait. He kissed her. He would have been happy to carry on, but when his hands slid under her shirt and ran up her warm stomach, she pushed him away. What? I couldn't fend Tenten off. Oh no. They'll be here in a bit, and since it was such a nice day, we're eating on the roof. Tenten's idea. She added quickly, so I have to set up the space heater for later and get the chairs and stuff set up. Naruto groaned, but went and picked up a chair. Off we go then. The roof looked quite good when they were done. The space heater was on the far right, while a table with 4 chairs burdened with food sat beside it. On the other side, strewn against the low wall, was a pile of cushions and blankets, and in the center Naruto had set a large metal barrel in which a fire was roaring. It was as much for heat as for light. The sky was streaky pink and blue as the bright orange sun sunk quickly out of sight behind the horizon as Hinata carried the CD player through the door and set it down. She fiddled with the dial until she found some music. Turning around, she found herself face to face with Naruto, who held out a hand. Taking it, unsure, she was surprised when he took her gently in his arms and waltzed her, a little unsteadily, around their campfire. So caught up she was, she didn't notice her cousin and his fiancée as they breezed through the door. Only when Naruto stopped did she pause and turn. Neji looked amused while Tenten looked like she was barely concealing her mirth. Hinata stumbled over, embarrassed, and gestured at the table. The guests sat down without a word and began to eat. They made it through the first bowl when Tenten and Neji both burst out laughing. Naruto flicked rice at them while Hinata giggled, self-conscious. The conversation flowed easily after that. Tenten noticed Hinata's ring about halfway through the evening and nearly upended the table as she lunged, but the only one to get splattered in the end was her as she put her hand in a bowl of soup. In the end they retired to the cushions where Tenten tried to teach Naruto how to waltz properly and Hinata rested her head on Neji's shoulder. Naruto was being chastised for making a wrong turn when the door swung open. Hinata and Neji both sat bolt upright, Neji inclining his head. Father, gasped Hinata. Hiyashi was frozen in the doorway staring at the 4 of them. He actually looked embarrassed. Naruto stepped away instinctively, then realized that Hiyashi clearly wasn't here as an enemy. Hinata had risen. She walked over to him and he nodded to the stairs. Agreeing silently, Hinata followed him down, throwing one reassuring look over her shoulder before she went. Down in the kitchen, Hiyashi looked around. It was very small. His daughter, however, seemed very at home here. She was making tea. Hinata was wondering what to do. Should she begin the conversation or should she wait for him to talk? More importantly, should she hide her hand so he didn't see the engagement ring he had bought for River? She turned and saw it was too late to consider that. Hiyashi's eyes were fixed firmly on her left hand. Quickly she folded behind her back and asked, "What are you?" Unfortunately, it was at the exact same time that Hiyashi opened his mouth and began to ask his own question. They both stopped and looked at the floor. "Please you," she mumbled, unable to say anything else. Hiyashi harumphed in that funny way he did when he was nervous or uncomfortable, which drew a chuckles from Hinata that she pushed down almost immediately. Hiyashi eyed her for a second but then straightened up and began what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "Hinata, you've chosen the path you want and I won't stand in your way. I've been thinking an arranged marriage is outdated anyway. Although Kyan-san hasn't been told the whole story, he's not been lied to either. We told him that you were not willing and quite frankly, neither was I, he was very understanding." Hinata stared, dumbfounded, at her father as he rattled off the passage, and she was still rooted to the spot for a full minute afterwards. She barely noticed as he walked past her to the door. Hiyashi's hand was on the handle when something slammed into his back. At first he didn't understand and his hands were halfway to his weapons belt when he realized it was his daughter. She was hugging him as hard as she could. He harumphed again, unused to the affection. "Thank you, Papa." She whispered. Hiashi didn't turn as he detached her hands from his middle, but he patted her hand once, his finger lingering on the ring. Then he walked calmly from her kitchen and her life. Hinata walked back through the door to see Naruto sat tensely on a dining chair. He jumped up when he saw her. Hinata was crying as she ran into his arms. He stroked her hair. Was he cruel to you? He asked, sounding angry. Hinata shook her head. No, actually he was perfectly civil. Oh, said Naruto, right, okay, so you've sorted it all out. Has he forgiven you? Hinata shook her head and looked up. Naruto was surprised to see that she was smiling, tears still wet on her face. No, but we'll get there eventually. Naruto smiled down at her and squeezed her round the middle. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, only to be interrupted, for what felt like the millionth time that day, by a very loud cough from Tenten. Rolling her eyes, Hinata turned back to her. Yes, waltz lesson, said Tenten, hand him over. They messed around a little longer, Naruto purposefully screwing up the waltz in the vain hope of making Tenten give up, but this just seemed to fuel her fire. Finally he just lost hope and instead began to take the mickey. He was prancing about looking like a complete lemming when Sakura breezed through the open door. Whoa there, called Naruto, holding up a hand, what do you bring to this fine gathering, pray tell? She looked at him, then held up a clinking crate. I got booze. Naruto was silent for a second. Meh, good enough, come on over. Slowly, as Sakura called people and word spread, the roof began to fill. Finally they were all there, sat around cheering on Kiba and Naruto as they had a very misguided beer-chugging contest. Neither was really victorious as they both gave up at the same time. Kiba passed out and was caught by a Kamaru while Naruto ran downstairs to throw up, much to Hinata's chagrin. After this Naruto retired to the cushions in the corner and lay there. Soon enough though Hinata came over and lay beside him, snuggled against his side. He put an arm around her. He was in paradise. But only just. He had a beautiful girl who was his alone. He had good friends who surrounded him. Being a shinobi was better than it had ever been. Two things alone hung over his head, rubbing obnoxiously against his nirvana. The first was something that he had been forcing out of his mind repeatedly for the last month. His promise to the Kyuubi. It hung over his head like a dark cloud. He had tried to tell himself he didn't care what the favor was as long as he had Hinata back with him alive and well, but he couldn't repress that little thrill of fear whenever he let his mind wander. Refusing to let it ruin the evening, he repeated to himself the little mantra he had created that he found calmed him for a little while: what's done is done. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. After the first, the second felt a little shallow and he almost felt a bit selfish for admitting this, but he wished that Sasuke could have been there with them, just for the time being, and then his world would have been complete. But as things were, he was halfway to heaven already and figured that as what he had now was way more than he deserved anyway, he was content. With that thought he pulled his treasure close to him and slipped into a sound sleep. If only he had known at that moment that his second wish was a lot closer than he thought. About 3 roofs away a figure was sat watching one, Rock Lee, do a bizarre slightly violent twitching dance with Tenten. It would have been funny, but the observer didn't really have much of a sense of humor. With a sigh he stood and spoke into the tiny radio mic around his N. Target observed. I'm leaving now. Affirmative, came the voice through the little speaker. See you in a minute. Sasuke watched the party. He was wholly disgusted with himself when he felt a little less of longing. Neji had rescued Tenten and was dancing very close to her, with those two a couple now. Shikamaru and Chuji had a poker game going on the clear table. Lee was swaying around the makeshift floor while Ino and Kiba carefully avoided him. They appeared to be dancing together too. Shino was sat on the floor next to the space heater. Maybe it was better for his bugs that way. Only Naruto and Hinata's legs were visible now, but Sasuke knew it was them. He couldn't say he hadn't been a little surprised when he saw them together. Naruto, loud, obnoxious Naruto, with the demure Hyuga princess. Strangely enough though, they seemed to fit. There was a slam of the door and the last guest toppled onto the roof. A cheer went up at the sight of her. Sasuke watched as the pink-haired girl clanked across the roof carrying a crate and dumped it on the table. She tore it open and pulled out a bottle that she flicked the top off with ease. As the others converged on the beer, Sasuke watched the girl sip hers and gaze affectionately at the sleeping couple by the wall. Sasuke shuddered when saw her. It was a sudden sharp pull that made his chest ache. Sakura. Quickly he squashed the feeling. An impatient crackle of the speaker made him jump and he chastised himself for lingering so long. He took one last look at the small party and shimmered into non-existence. What are you looking at, Sakura-chan? Asked Lee, bouncing over. Huh. Oh. Nothing, Lee-san. She smiled warmly. I'll get you another drink. Away he bound to the cooler. No, Lee, really I'm fine. But he was already gone and she decided to let him be. Before she turned back to her friends, she looked once at the moon. It hung low tonight, just behind the mountains, but still large enough to throw long shadows over all of Konoha. She gazed up and wondered about the figure she had seen silhouetted against its silvery face. Sakura-chan. With a fixed smile she turned away. She had probably imagined it anyway. The end. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.